Why do you stress the importance of the relationships between supply chain partners in the book?
The reason why relationships are so important in this context is that if we're looking to improve the overall performance of the supply chain, these days in business, it's very unusual that we would control more than one or two steps in the supply chain. So if we go back to the early 20th century, for example, to the Ford Motor Company, companies tended to be vertically integrated, and Ford was a great example of that. So they owned the rubber plantations that produced the rubber to make the tires for the cars. They owned the iron ore mines to get the ore that they needed to make the steel for the panels of the cars, and they even owned the distribution networks and the shops in the main street where the cars were sold and the employees who did the selling. So they owned the entire supply chain from end to end. So they exercised control and integration through ownership. Today we can't do that because companies, because of advances in technology, information communications technology, transport technology, deregulation of trade and finance, companies have become vertically disintegrated. So they have spun off activities to allow themselves to focus on their core activities. But they still need to make their supply chains work, and they still need to optimize their supply chains. And the only way now they can influence the performance of their overall supply chains is through the quality of the relationships they have with their supply chain partners. And their supply chain partners will include suppliers, service providers, as well as compliance agencies, regulatory authorities, and so on. And this is why relationships are so vitally important. There are many different types of relationships. Some of them are long-term, some of them are short-term, some of them are quite simple. You may have one or two interfaces. Some of them are very, very complex. So, for example, a manufacturer may have supply chain relationship with a logistics service provider that may last for many, many years. There may be many, many points of interaction even on a global level. Whereas on the other hand, you may have a relationship that is short-term, even temporary, that is to do with setting up a particular project, getting a project up and running and implemented, maybe building a factory or setting up a distribution center. But all of those relationships are crucially important. So it's important to understand what they're like, how they work, what their components are, how they perform, and how to measure them. It's the only way in the modern economy that we can optimize our supply chains.